Well, good morning all over the continental United States of America. America. Hope you guys are doing well today. This is the Way Forward broadcast, and I'm the co-host of the show, Erskine and Navitate. So excited to see you guys once again on this Saturday morning. Now, we've been dancing around, playing a little musical times here with you. Sometimes we've come early, sometimes we've come a little bit later. But hey, you know what? We're always coming. And so I am broadcasting here today live from York, Pennsylvania. Never been to York, Pennsylvania before, but it's about 11 or so hours from Nashville, Tennessee. I'm here with my band of 5 members. They are graciously bowing out of this episode and opting to sleep until our dress rehearsal a little bit later on today. But because we got the Way Forward, I want to get up and hang out with you guys. The co-host of the show is Jason Plummer. I'm bringing him on. And so, Jason.
Good morning.
Good morning, sir. How art thou?
Live and living from Litchfield, Illinois. Doing great.
Live and living from Litchfield. All right. Okay. I see what you did there. I see the creativity springs supreme this morning.
That's right. That's right.
So it's always exciting to have some time with you, my friend. Always good for us to be able to reunite again and talk about race, politics, religion, and how the church and God's people might move forward. But before we do any of that, before we get to that, we got to talk about them bells. Here come the bells. Here come the bells. Oh, yeah.
I'm inclined to actually start watching them more.
He's a believer.
I heard rumors that they could possibly move up to get Justin Fields, and I thought, no, that's not what the Bears do. We blow our draft picks.
Here come the Bears.
We do all kinds of crazy. And then Ethan and I were paying attention to the draft, and hey, Ethan says, "Hey, Dad, they just made a deal with the Giants, and they're up to number 11, and Justin Fields is still on the table." I was like, "Oh man,
say it ain't so."
Got giddy.
It ain't so.
Got giddy. And we got Justin Fields, and I'm excited about him. I watched him at Ohio State tear up the Big Ten, and I thought, man, he destroyed my Badgers. He destroyed everybody else. He's a dual threat. He's got great feet. He's good. He's smart. He uses great hands. I'm excited. The only thing I'm worried about is he's got to be coached under Nagy and Pace. So Stephen A. made a comment that I thought was really helpful. He said, he's like, I'm excited about Justin Fields. This guy's got tons of potential. I'm just don't trust Nagy and Pace. I'm like, you know what? I'm buying what you're selling. I'm buying what you're selling. Yeah. I want to trust Nagy. I want to. I like him. But they have not developed quarterbacks there, and I just don't want to see Justin go into that horrible trend that Chicago has, where quarterbacks go to die.
Yep, I was going to say it's the place where quarterbacks go to die.
Yep, he's too talented. Too talented.
Well,
but he's exciting, and then on top of that,
he can't be stopped. He keeps going with the Bears.
Yeah. Then we got Tevin Jenkins from Ohio State. We got us a lineman. This kid looks good. He is strong. He's fast. He can play tackle. He can play guard. I mean, he can fill spots in that line. So I'm thinking right now the Bears are in the top 5 for pulling it out in the draft this year. And we ain't been there in a while.
Okay.
Ain't been there in a while.
All right. Well,
so
I echo those sentiments, although I didn't get a chance to get as excited as you were, because I've been traveling and rehearsing and getting things ready for this tour. And so I've been kind of getting bits and pieces of what was going on in the draft. And I'm, excited every year that something happens that hopefully will make the Bears better. And, we both share that commonality. And I had somebody ask me this week, they said, "You're from Texas, so how did you end up liking the Bears?" And so I had to take it back to 1985.
1985, that's right.
And remind them of those monsters of the Midway. Remind them of Refrigerator Perry. Remind them of Walter Payton and
Michael
Jim McMahon.
Singletary.
Yeah, Mike Singletary, and Willie Gault, and Matt Stewie, and I had to take them back.
And even Jim McMahon, kind of.
Yeah.
Richard Dent.
Yeah. So good times. I became a Bear fan then, and have always remained a Bear fan. And then along with our love for theology, we also share a love for the Chicago Bears, and that was kind of a neat twist in our relationship. The Lord sovereignly sent me a friend who also loves the same team that I love, and so yeah, those Chicago Bears, excited about that. And the season will be what it'll be, but it gives us some good talking points as we relate to their culture. We might not always start with. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, and I actually think with Nagy's offense coming out of Andy Reid's mentorship, I see Justin Fields playing a lot like Patrick Mahomes. I think he's found his quarterback. So I could see. I don't want to get too, because the Bears just do this to you. The Bears are like the Cubs in this way, and they get you excited a little bit, and they keep that kind of fan favor going, and then they choke and they do something crazy, and you're just left brokenhearted, And but I'm excited about seeing what they do with that offense now. I am. So.
Yeah.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah. Hope springs eternal. And
That's right. That's right.
Late April, early May, because no games have been played, no training camps, no OTAs. It's just the possibility that something good is going to happen this year. Yeah. And so every team has that possibility and that hope, although some people, it's very unrealistic, but people can do what they got to do. Yeah. And so we're excited. We're excited about the Bears. We're excited that you guys have joined us this morning. Thank you guys for tuning in. The way forward. I know we've been dancing around with the times, but that's okay. If you're up and you're here and you're with us, then let us know. Comment section is turned on. We have YouTube streaming right now, and then we also have Facebook Live that's active. And so we are going to continue on today because we've got a very special broadcast, one in which we've never done it this way before, but I think it's going to be very beneficial for us to fly in some interviews that we've had. As we talked a little bit about the tour that we were setting up, it didn't materialize exactly how we thought because we thought we'd be on it together. But nonetheless, we got some good comments and good feedback, and we can continue to get good comments and feedback. But we wanted to share a little bit of what it is that we have available right now. And Jason, can you set up this tour and then the 5 questions that we were asking as we interviewed Christian influencers that were out there, pastors?
Yeah. So Suresh and I wanted to get us to a place where we could actually begin to talk to other pastors about the same things that we're discussing and begin to get their insight on what they're seeing and how they're handling it. And so we took Martin Luther King's letter from the Birmingham jail, and with a little bit of help of Ken Magnuson, who's an ethics professor, and we came up with 5 questions that we wanted to ask these pastors. And the questions go around this letter and some of the things that Martin Luther King was dealing with. And one of the things we brought up first was well-intended white evangelicals seem to be glossing over the problem. And one of the things we asked these pastors is do you see well-intended white evangelicals glossing over the problem of racism inside of our culture, in our church, in our communities? Following that, Martin Luther King made the point that racism is a moral issue, which makes it a gospel issue. And how would you respond to that? And so we asked the pastors to respond to the idea that if racism is a moral issue, that makes it a gospel issue, then how do you present that before your people, and how do you deal with it as you're engaging events that are happening, for instance, like these police shootings or whatnot. King also makes the point that racial reconciliation is costly because justice is costly. Do you believe that? And how would you respond to that? And then finally, it needs to be a clear, persistent voice of white evangelical pastors that is loud enough to be heard if restoration is going and reconciliation is going to happen. And one of our questions was, do you hear that voice, or do you long for that voice to be louder, even from white evangelical pastors, that this is an issue that needs to be addressed? And so that's kind of the 5 topic questions that we're engaging these pastors. And the interview that I got to do with Erskine and Pastor Aaron Dickinson was just phenomenal. We could have spent, I think, several hours just listening to him talk. He was so insightful, and he was humble and gentle and kind. I mean, he was not ripping into an agenda or philosophy. He was just literally giving us a trek of his ministry from the time he joined the ministry until now, what he has seen. And man, is it helpful? He was
Sure.
good. And then,
Absolutely.
you got to have, I guess, a phenomenal interview up in Wisconsin, and that sounded exciting too. So I'm really excited to hear what these guys have to say.
Yeah, as I've been preparing for the show and revisiting the conversations, they're just wonderful conversations. I will say, just as a quick note, you may want to turn your audio up just a tad bit because the interview with Pastor Aaron was a little bit muted because one, he had his mask on, and then one, I was maybe a little bit too far away from him. I didn't want to have the microphone right up in his face just because of that social distance thing. And so some of the audio is a little bit low there, but I think you'll be able to discern what it is that he's saying. He is a kind, gracious, and humble man. And so one of the narratives that's out there is that if you are an evangelical and you're discussing this issue, you automatically have an agenda, or if you're gospel minded and Jesus loving, that, you can't simultaneously have a love for justice and its components and how that looks. And so maybe that narrative is not quite true. In fact, I would dare say that when you see the humility and hear the humility from some of the perspective and scenarios that he's dealt with, I think you'll gain a greater appreciation of it. Each snippet is about 3 minutes long, and so we're not airing like a 20-minute interview. We're condensing it down to about 3 to 4 minutes, and then we'll have some time where we talk about the response. As I said before, you guys are welcome to comment. Glad you guys are tuning in this morning. And Lisa, thank you for joining the show this morning. We drove through East Tennessee yesterday, and it was a beautiful day in East Tennessee, and the band, we stopped right outside of Bristol, and they said, "What is this place called?" Pals. I got to tell them all about Pals, and they said, "Should we go and get a hot dog?" But we actually ended up stopping at Bojangles, and so that is music to my ears and a salve to my heart there. So let us get started with these interviews today. This is Pastor Aaron. Those were the 5 questions that we asked. If any of this was missed at the beginning of the program, you can always go back and see the entirety of the program. However, you might want to hang out with us live now as we are discussing some interviews that we've had with some pastors who are addressing the subject of race and reconciliation, how we find ourselves at this moment. I would say that this theme for this segment is, how do we speak the truth? How do we speak the truth in an era that doesn't necessarily value that or the way that truth is spoken? And so listen to that very carefully as you hear this interview.
They're not quite understanding why the African American community is becoming more impatient with the process. Yeah. And as they're watching, so just like last week, Dante Wright, and that whole situation, or the lieutenant, Army lieutenant in Virginia, they're seeing these things, and they're waiting for, or they're wondering if white evangelical pastors are going to make a comment or talk about this.
Well, and I don't like to throw the broad tent.
Yeah.
Because I think there's people in the broad tent that don't feel the way everybody else is feeling. So I don't like to blanket to say that people think one way or the other. What I will say is that as believers and as Christians, it is our responsibility to speak the truth. Mm-hmm. And the Bible tells us to speak the truth in love, regardless of what side is on. If you see something that is wrong, then as fellow believers and Christians, then we should call it to be wrong.
Sure.
And so, we can speak the truth in love and not take a side and not to point fingers. Mm-hmm. But, based on what the Bible says, what do we believe should be our actions? And that's what I try to do is based on it, and that's why I try to teach our kids is,
that was going to be my next question. So you got a young African-American man in here who's watched the news. He's seen some things. His parents are upset. He's upset. He's having a hard time in class. He's not focused, not paying attention. Maybe he's angry even, right? So you're sitting him down and you say, okay, look, what's going on? And he starts to tell you, I'm just angry at this situation, at this. How do you, as a pastor and a principal, help that young man?
Anyone, it's okay to be angry. Okay? It's not, the sin is not that you're angry. The sin is what you do with your anger. Okay? And you can't allow one circumstance or situation to dictate now what you're going to do. You still know what's right and what's wrong. You still know what God is calling on us to do. So he's calling on you to come to school. He's calling on you to make sure that you are assessing your environment here and what you're supposed to do, and then you can be that example. And still be angry with society and the way society is handling their issues.
So some really good comments there about how we address the situation and how we speak truth in the day and the era that we live in. Hopefully you guys were able to hear the tail end of that as he was talking about the fact that if you have someone who's angry, the anger is not so much the issue as it is how one responds to the anger and being productive as a result of counterproductive. Jason, take us back just a little bit in that interview to some of the other salient points that were talked about. We're not going to play the entirety of the interview. We don't have time to do all that, but your reflections on that.
What I loved about that particular comment was it speaks against the angry black man narrative that the media puts out there, that all African men, boys are just angry, violent black men. And Aaron Dickerson is just not that. He's never been that from the day I've known him. And he teaches his boys the same thing, because you got to understand, Coach Aaron, he is a Lutheran pastor in St. Louis. He's also the principal of a Lutheran school in the east side of St. Louis, a predominantly African-American community that has a lot of poverty issues, a lot of things that are going on. And he is a beacon of light to these young men. And so he comes in there and he tells them, look, your anger is not your problem. Anger is fine, but how you deal with it is a big problem. And I've watched him model that. And essentially, it's kind of the be angry but do not sin that he's taking there. And he's helping these young men work through it. He's not denying the issue. He's not sidestepping the issue. He is completely taking it on, speaking truth in love. And so I think that's what has caught me. He's breaking down some of these narratives that are out there that, these African American men are unreasonable. They're just off the charts, and you can't talk, you can't have dialogue, can't do anything, and that's just not true at all. That's just not. And that's just one of his gospel witnesses with these boys and these other students. He's got a whole school full of students that he influences, and that's one of the things I walked away from that saying, man, what a neat, humble, meek man who's so powerful with these kids and these parents. And he's not just influencing the kids. He gets one-on-one time with mom and dad, and he gets to do the same thing with them. It's just really remarkable. Really remarkable.
Comment section is turned on. I know there seems to be, by virtue of some of the names that I'm saying, some who are also principals of schools who are watching this. And so as you are there, perhaps contemplating how to engage in the conversation and how to speak truth, there is, from all of our perspectives, a truth that we get an opportunity to speak based on our understanding and our perspective. But then we can be able to access through some of these interviews and some of the, opportunities that we have, truth that comes from other places as well. And then to be able to bring those two things together. One of the things that we've been able to do on this show, Jason, is we've been able to say, okay, there's some things that we definitely need to look at in our culture. There's some things that we definitely need to look at in our church. There's definitely some things that we need to look at in our respective communities, whether it be African-American, Caucasian, minority, majority communities, and also some things that we need to look at personally in our own lives. And that has been a helpful process in being able to speak truth and to allow those relationships to form so that we can receive that truth.
Well, I think also just being willing to be transparent and acknowledge the truth. Like, one of the things I'm finding that's so difficult to talk to people is they refuse to acknowledge any sentiment of what could be right. Because the moment you acknowledge it, it's almost like you put yourself on a camp. Either I acknowledge systematic racism or I don't, or I acknowledge critical race theory or I don't, or something like that. And all of a sudden you've got this polarization, and there's no ground to talk through some things. I've been honest with you about the systematic racism. There are things I can see and get. There are things I don't see and get. Am I fully on board? No, not exactly. Am I open to talking about it, working through it? Absolutely. But the moment I say that to my conservative friends or minded friends, maybe, oh, you're liberal. Or if I'm not liberal enough to my other, and we talked about this before, I want to acknowledge there's an issue. I want to acknowledge there's a problem. There is a problem. The reason I know there's a problem is there's so much hatred and strife and tension between these communities that you have to see that there's a problem. There's an issue. And we have to be able to be willing to address it. And I can get angry about it and blow up somebody else's camp, or I can take my anger, meld it to the gospel. Okay, let's sit down and talk, and let's figure out what's going on. And let's at least acknowledge that there's an issue. And one of the things I liked about Coach Aaron is how well he did that. He acknowledges a problem, but that doesn't give us a license to go off the deep end, burn things down, or sit ourselves in a camp and just fire missiles to the other camp without even using any kind of reason or logic. I thought his that kind of a proverb of, meekness is not weakness, is power under control. That's something I got from Coach Aaron.
Right. So draw up a little bit closer so that you can hear another portion of this interview where he's going to kind of double down on this issue of speaking the truth and how it's our responsibility. I want you guys to hear this segment.
Now they're starting to speak from their platform because they see the power that they have. So if something is wrong, and based on our biblical knowledge and based on what we know that God wants us to do, I shouldn't be the only one speaking to it. Yeah. Because if it's wrong, it's wrong. Yeah. Okay. And so, if I come to you as my brother and say, "Well, what do you think about this situation?" and you say, "It's wrong," and I say, "Well, can we go and kind of talk about it and to the power that be and see can we get things changed?" You say, "Well, I believe it's wrong, but I'm not willing to go out and speak on it." Then what you're pretty much saying is that, okay, it's wrong, but hey, I can live with it. Yeah. If it costs me to do something.
Yeah. And it might be easier for me to live with it than you live with it.
Because it affected me.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But if you're truly my brother,
that's right.
You would care about how it's affecting me.
Yeah.
And if I'm your brother, I would care about how something is affecting you.
Right.
But a lot of times we're self-preservation.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
We think about it, and that's what I was saying is that, we have to think about what am I willing to invest in this situation to make it change. And if I'm not willing to invest anything in it, it's just like me. If I'm the principal here and I really don't care anything about those kids, I'm not going to do anything. I'll just sit behind the desk and do the minimum. Yeah. Like right now, in a few minutes, I'm going down there to the 8th grade class and take it for the rest of the day. But if I really care about these students, like I do, then I'm going to care about all of them. When they come through the door with baggage, I got to help them unpack the baggage. I can't just come down on them. I got to understand, maybe they didn't have anything to eat today. And they missed breakfast. So now they're in the classroom and they're causing issues. Now I can come and punish them, or I can talk to them and say, "Well, what's wrong?" "Well, I'm hungry. I didn't have anything to eat." And I can say, "Well, go back to class and wait till lunch." Or I can reach in one of my drawers and pull out and give them something that they can eat until lunch. If I want them to go back into class and do better, then I got to address that need that he has that's causing him not to do what he needs to do.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just food.
Sometimes it's just food. Sometimes it was what happened on the way to school. And they need to talk about it, to unpack it before they start their day. And so I got to give them that time to unpack it. Because I already know if I send them to class right now, what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so my door has to be open for more than just the educational part of it. And as a pastor, that helps because they know I care. And I'm going to do what it takes to make sure that they can come to me when they have issues or problems other than,
Ooh, that was so
Yeah.
good.
Well, in the context of that conversation, what I think is helpful is we were going back to the voice of white evangelical pastors. So that I think that's really important because what he was saying there was one of the questions we were asking is do you wish the white evangelical voice was louder to help you? And that's when he was starting to talk about, hey, if we both see something is wrong and we both agree it's wrong, and I say, hey, let's go talk to the powers that be about, fixing this. And he said, well, I'm not willing to do that. Then there's a problem. And that's when we become self-preservationists. So it is important to context because that struck me a lot when we were talking about this. Why is it necessary for white evangelical pastors to stand up and say something? It's because inside the Christian faith, when we are brothers, if we're truly brothers in Christ, and we truly love each other the way Christ tells us to love each other, when there's something that is not right, we should be united together in trying to fix it and solve a gospel solution. And I don't know if the Black community is seeing that, and that's part of their frustration.
Yeah, I want to jump in at this point and just simply say that a lot of that was almost cathartic when he was talking about that and using the analogy of a school, which that perfectly fits the context that he's in. But if you would project that to our society and say, well, to care about people in our society means that we don't just care about the people who look like us, or what often happens within the context of the church, especially the evangelical church. Let's get Black people who are very well educated, who speak, think pretty much the way that the majority culture speaks, and we'll integrate them into our midst, and we'll say that we're diverse because we have now Black faces and white faces, majority and minority, who exactly think the same. They're in the same socioeconomic level, the same educational level, and we'll say we have diversity. Well, in fact, it's not really that much diversity because people think and act and sound the same. And a lot of times, well-meaning people, I kind of get this from them, is like, we like Black people who are responsible. We like Black people who, fiscally conservative. We like Black people who vote conservative. And I'm thinking, well, you like people who are like you. You don't necessarily like Black people, because there are a lot of Black people who aren't conservative, sometimes because of circumstances and the desperation of their situations. They're not Dave Ramsey fiscally responsible. And how do you like those Black people? And what I liked about, and what I love, I should say, about that answer was it gave a perspective to be able to say, do you care about all these students? Do you care about all these people in society? Or are you only caring about people who it's advantageous for you to care about because they're like you?
Yeah. Black or white. That means there's white people you wouldn't like either, because they take that progressive liberal mindset, or they take that, conservative mindset. So it's not really about diversity among the nations or ethnicities. It's really just about, as long as you're optically looking diverse, I'm okay with that. But once you actually start getting into the heart of diversity, well, we're not. And he had a wonderful conversation on that topic. I don't know if we're going to cover that, but when he talks about his ministry, the church wanting to minister to a growing Black community, and all of a sudden African Americans start coming to the church, and they get African American leadership, and then before you know it, African Americans begin to dominate the congregation as far as numbers and thinking, and all of a sudden you have this white flight that happens. That's an example of, look, we thought we wanted diversity, but
until we got diversity.
Once we got outnumbered, we're out and we're gone, and we come up with these reasons. And that didn't just happen once, but that's happened all throughout his ministry. It's a trend that takes place. And so this idea of wanting diversity, I think, again, optically, yeah, you're all for it. On the poster, look at us. We've got all these people here, and we can put a picture on the website. But once you start getting into
We're holding hands.
once you start getting into leadership decisions, once you start getting into things as simple as like music, or how to do liturgy or whatever, we start making some changes, and all of a sudden you have, our family feels like it's best if we go to this church over here or that church over there, and it's no longer a diverse church anymore, because maybe it never was a diverse church, really, right? So he was extremely insightful on that.
Well, we're not going to get to that segment this week, but that is one that we need to play a little bit later, because as you had mentioned several times, he has been through the experience of a community saying, we need to reach the people in this community, which makes absolute sense.
Yeah.
And then when you begin reaching people, it's kind of like the story of Jonah. When you actually begin reaching them and seeing them come to the school and seeing them come to faith and seeing their families transform, seeing them become more active and involved in the school, then all of a sudden you start looking around and going, wait a minute, there's now more of them than us.
Yeah.
We out of here.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of a sad commentary. And quite frankly, that's led many people to say that, the whole reconciliation piece is just simply impossible, practically speaking, in America, because we're going to gravitate back toward our preferences. We don't really feel comfortable with this whole diversity thing. And I think that shows the underbelly of sort of some difficult spiritual currents that are taking place also in our society.
Yeah. Again, it's from the neglect of the.
Jason, pause there. I don't know if that was a grand pause or
teaching of God's word. It's. Oh.
No, you're good. I think coming back. I want to get a comment. Yep.
Yeah. Go ahead.
You're there. You're there.
Okay. No, I was just saying the part of that undercurrent that we're not the church is part of is because, again, there's been a neglect of the truth from the pulpits. There's been a neglect of leadership, modeling and engaging kind of your Acts type church. There's been a lot more politics in the pulpit than I would ever allow my own pulpit, and so we start to see culturally things worked out in the church that just are not appropriate for the gospel kingdom minded church, and that's one of the things the church has to get out of that current and begin to swim in God's current.
Yeah. Got a comment on the screen from Linda Williams. Thank you so much, Linda. It's good to see you joining in this morning. Your comment, doesn't it begin with taking the time for conversation? We don't know because we don't ask. We don't see because we don't engage. We give thinking that's enough to soothe our own souls.
Yeah, that's what I think was helpful with Aaron is we sat down and talked to him. We didn't assume any, we just didn't assume he's from East St. Louis, so he's going to have this perspective. Oh, he's Lutheran, he's going to have this perspective. He broke all those stereotypes. And if you think about it, from conservative Christianity perspective, he's supposed to be liberal. He's supposed to be progressive. He's supposed to be angry. He's supposed to be all these things. And in fact, he wasn't. He was actually wise, thoughtful, meek, active, provided solutions for the church. Had we made all these assumptions and didn't have the conversation with him, we would never reap the benefit of his wisdom. But we sat down and spoke with him, heard him, and now we get to glean them out if we have more of those conversations, right? Instead of making assumptions.
Yeah, it harkens back to a conversation that I think, and thanks, Linda, for that conversation there, piece. But an interview that I had this summer in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, with one of the community leaders that was there. I'll make this statement, and I don't, YouTube, can you see me? Make sure that it's actually me so that you hear me saying the statement and I'm not someone else. This is the real Erskine making the statement. I think we have to be careful with our criticism, our carte blanche criticism of Black Lives Matter. I know there's the Every Black Life Matters group now, which probably I would be a part of, but with Black Lives Matter, because when I did some interviews of like local leaders who were tabbed as leaders of Black Lives Matter, they were none of the things that Black Lives Matter is. And we have to recognize that more than an organization, Black Lives Matter is a movement. And there are people who join the movement from various backgrounds and contexts. Sometimes they embrace what the national platform talks about. Sometimes they have nothing to do with that. And it was very clear when I was talking with leaders in Bartlesville, Oklahoma, that those community leaders really have nothing to do with the national platform. They're just community leaders and know that there's an opportunity to impact their community. They already have the ear of their community because they've been serving there. And so Black Lives Matter kind of puts their banner on them, but they're not really wanting to have that banner on them. But they're just wanting to serve their community. So we have to be careful with who all we put in a particular category. And I just want to make sure that I say that there are those from Black Lives Matter that I would wholeheartedly align with, because they are doing and saying the things of a biblical nature and of a Christ-centered nature that necessitate growth and change. So let's not get so caught up in what kind of t-shirt they're wearing. It looks like Jason has paused. Linda's got a comment. Thank you so much today for joining. Scott Bourne joining us from the great state. He puts a comment up here. And Jason, I'm just dealing with one of the comments that's here on the screen, as you can well see. Is resistance to diversity only from one side? You want to take that one?
Yeah, no, it's not. It's from a lot of sides. I think the point we're making today is that when we did the interview, I think we were just a couple of days out from Martin Luther King's anniversary of going to jail in Alabama. And so it all kind of fit together. And so we were talking from this perspective. We have interviews, I hope. Actually, I think you might have even done one in Wisconsin with a white pastor, right?
We didn't get to that one yet.
Okay, so that's on the line. No, I get where Scott's coming from. So because right now we're like, man, you seem to be attacking the white evangelical. No, it's not an attack on the white evangelical, so to speak. There is resistance. There are black churches who refuse to engage in the conversation as much as there are white churches. The point we're trying to make with asking Coach Aaron from a African American perspective, pastor, principal in the community, is what are you hearing from the other side? And I think that would be appropriate, considering that he is in the black community and a black leader, and wanting to hear the white evangelical voice. And I thought he was very gracious and kind and helpful. I would be interested to ask some white pastors two questions. One, are you hearing the white evangelical voice speak up? And two, what are you hearing from the black church? Because that's funny. What you're hearing may not be exactly what they're saying, and I would love to clarify that. Those are the two questions I would ask. But yeah. Is resistance to diversity only from one side? No, but we seem to be engaging the white evangelical pastor right now.
Yeah. So thank you very much for that question, Scott. I appreciate the thoughtful provocation there, at least to some extent, because yes, Jason, I completely agree with you. It is not just a one-sided issue. But when we come to this discussion, we are not talking about a 50-50 proposition where on the black side, there's this leveraging of power, leveraging of opportunity, leveraging of resources. And so we bring that to the white side of this issue, which is also leveraging its power and its influence and its ability and historicity. We're looking at this from a standpoint of simply saying, yes, there's issues on both sides. That's why we're having this discussion. That's why we're engaged in doing a broadcast like this, except for we must understand that the burden of history, the burden of resources, the burden of platforms, and the burden of responsibility falls squarely on the side of white pastors. I don't know any other way to say that except for the fact that you can't address an issue from a platform that you don't have. You can't speak to power or exert power, I should say, when you don't have it. And in the evangelical ranks, few and increasingly more, I should say, optimistically more, voices are being allowed to speak and give perspective to that, but that has not always been the case. And lest we go down a very dark trail of the fact that the Southern Baptist Convention historically was created because they wanted to hang on to slavery, and various institutions like Bob Jones and other places, not to call out a lot of names, but that was kind of a thought in America that you could deny people opportunities for education, that they were not worthy of, certain types of access to information or access to books or access to resources. Now, the society has a completely different discussion that's going on in terms of reparations and some of the things that are related to that. But I think evangelicals need to have an equally robust discussion related to the fact that when we are asking African Americans to give an account, sometimes we're doing that from the standpoint of not recognizing that African Americans haven't even been allowed to enter the room, sit at the table, or have the discussion. And so, yes, there's some adjustments, I would say, that need to take place on both sides. But let's be clear about the fact that historically speaking, and from the weight of opportunity that we've seen, it is historically and majority-wise been white pastors who have had the opportunity who have shied back away from this discussion.
Yeah. And only recently has it become prevalent to hear the Black church's voice. I would say within the last 40 years, it's been steadily growing. And I would say in the last 20 years, it's really gotten to have more of a platform. So when you talk about these things, we tend to focus historically only on the last few years or the years that we're alive. But we're talking about a conversation that's been happening for several hundred years. So you have to take that context into play when you're having these conversations. It just would be a little irresponsible to neglect 150, 200 years worth of things when we're talking.
Yeah, we could talk about the AME church and the fact that slave owners would not necessarily allow their slaves to be able to worship with them. And so they started their own worship services, which gave birth to the AME church. But we can go into a lot of that. I think maybe referentially, and I don't want to overspeak this question, because at some point, hopefully we have Scott and Mayoshi and several other people that will be on the show. Marcia, have them all kind of come in and, make a statement or two on the show. I think that'd be a cool live experience. But I don't know that Scott knows any pastors himself, perhaps, that have shied away from this issue, because I know the pastor that he currently serves under right now is one who will address these issues and has always spoken to these issues. And that's the reason, one of the main reasons why I was able to flourish and have the freedom that I did in the Ferris Independent School District and also in the city of Ferris, is because he did speak to these issues and he did address these issues. And so we're not saying all white pastors, don't hear us say that. We are not saying that at all. But we're saying that there has been, historically speaking, from Martin Luther King up until present, a lack of people who want to have this discussion because of a variety of reasons. Now, I want to jump to segment 2 here. What time are we looking at here? Yeah, we've got a couple minutes here. I want to jump to segment 2 here in our discussion because I want you guys to hear from Pastor Kimbrough on who works on this issue. And he's extremely gracious about who works on this issue. And I would just say in review, neither one of these pastors or men spoke of this being a responsibility that they were pointing their finger at anybody. That is not the attitude of these pastors. That's not our attitude. We're just simply saying, for the discussion to continue, there needs to be an opening of dialogue, and the majority culture, who has the majority of platforms to be able to speak on this, can open up some of those dialogues as well. So here we got Pastor Kimbrough speaking to the question of everyone. And remember those 5 questions that we'd been asking. He's responding here to one of those questions related about who he's seen and how his experience has been related to. And so you'll hear a little bit more audio on this. So if you've got everything turned up to the max, I just want to let you know you could probably turn it back down to normal levels, because this was a audio interview or a video interview that we did where he was on another screen and I was on another screen. So the audio's picked up here pretty good. Segment 2.
In regard to the last question that you just asked there, I think it's a generalization to say that white pastors, have glossed, or do I think that they have glossed it over? Some have, absolutely, Erskine. But then there are others that have been more vigilant than I think a lot of African American pastors. But I think the issue at hand with that is being able to understand the struggle. And I think if you have not gone through the struggle, Erskine, and this is just my opinion, that it's really hard to understand the pain and suffering attached to the struggle that a lot of African Americans and Latino Americans have gone through. And so again, I don't think the word gloss over that's a good terminology. I think a lot of people it's kind of like the virus in the vaccine, Erskine. When we first started this a year ago, it was, those people in Milwaukee in the inner city, it doesn't affect us. And so, we're not really concerned about it until it actually started to impact people all over our state and all over our country. And then it became very important to be vigilant on that, because now it hits me in a place that I can really feel. And I think it's that way with the question that you asked too. I don't think it's intentional with a lot of European American pastors. I think it's just that they have not participated personally in the struggle.
So let me give a little bit of context there. Pastor Kimbrough is up in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, at an inner city Lutheran school and church. And he's the pastor there, as well as he works with the Lutheran school there. And so he's been gracious enough in times past to have me into his office and have some quality meetings with him. Because of social distancing and other things like that, even though I was in Milwaukee, I was not actually able to be in the room with him, which may have helped the audio to work a little bit better. So that was Pastor Kimbrough. And that was his response to our white pastors glossing over the issue. Jason, your response to that, and then audience, your response.
I think that is very pertinent, and on the one hand, there's a tension there, because I totally agree with, we haven't engaged that struggle, and until you are in that culture, in that environment, it really is hard to understand. And I didn't know this until I grew up. I did not grow up as a typical white American, right? So I often spent time in communities where I was the minority. For instance, when we lived in Guam for 2.5 years, I went to school with predominantly Chamorro people, and I was not the majority culture or the majority race there. And there were times when they let me know that things. As a matter of fact, there was a unspoken holiday at the high school that was never really enforced, but it was part of the culture. Was something called Kill Hunky Day. I mean, it was just. That was part of it, and white kids didn't go to school that day. And it wasn't that they were necessarily going to kill Honky Day, but it was just a day that they reminded you that you were not to go to school that day, because it would cause trouble. And
that's racism, by the way.
So that is kind of what we did. So I got a taste of it, but coming back to America, where I was in the majority culture. And then going to a small town where there were no African Americans, you begin to see, okay, now I kind of get what they're talking about a little bit. This struggle, this tension, this feeling of you're always, all eyes are on you, or the decisions you make are a little more critical than the decisions other people make, because according to cultural boundaries, if I'm living in, again, with Chamorros, they had certain cultural expectations, and if you didn't meet those expectations, well, you're white, and then you weren't always invited to things because you were white, or you didn't engage families the same way. So that was my growing up, and so I got it. I'm not saying I understand it completely. That would be crazy, but I got a taste of it. I understand kind of what he's talking about. On the other side of that, there's the feeling of, I don't know if I'll ever understand it. You know what I'm saying? Like it's almost out of my reach, because I can never be black. I can never be what that is, and so there is this kind of tension there that I don't know what to do with exactly, that the gospel has to resolve for me, because I'm not exactly sure. I can engage the discussion. I can try to offer what I'm seeing and biblical insight, but at the end of the day, I'm not an African American man living in America. And I think there's been some discussion around that idea too, because I think Vodi Bachman has spoken to a little bit of some of the problems with that. So,
yeah. Well, I want to jump in really quickly and just say that I did appreciate his response, at least to this point of the question, in the sense that, wow, there's a house that's on fire. We now can no longer say, I don't see that house that's on fire, because it impacts all of us, and it impacts us in particular ways. Sometimes we don't like the way that it impacts us, but we do recognize that, for some of this discussion, and I think both pastors said this, when it doesn't necessarily apply to you and you don't necessarily have a sense of the struggle, so to speak, or what anybody is talking about, referencing there, then it's not as much of an issue. It doesn't feel like as hot button an issue or something that we need to be responding to until it actually affects what it is that you are doing. And so we're now brought into a discussion in which, no matter who you are, we recognize that our society is changing. We recognize the church is changing. We recognize that our culture and many of the things that we, have kind of understood as norms are beginning to shift, and then trying to put our feet on solid ground. And I think, Jason, you said that very well. It is the gospel. It is the hope of the gospel. It is the level ground before the foot of the cross that puts us on that understanding. But we don't want to approach that from the standpoint of saying the gospel, so far as, you made a critical point there, Jason. There are certain boundaries and certain norms and certain expectations for the way that certain groups handle the gospel, and the way that they present the gospel, and how they combine the gospel and kingdom. And so to invalidate one of those ways of dealing with this situation, I think would be unhelpful, as we not only seek to create conversations, but create a pathways for us to be able to move forward and to be able to advance a unified gospel, powerful kingdom front in our nation and in our world.
yeah. Yeah.
I want to get to Timothy Edson here in just a second. I'll listen to your comments, but I'll read through this before I pop it up on the screen. Thank you, Timothy, and thank you, Marcia, for your interactions with the show today.
Yeah. No, I tend to agree with that. I think the gospel is really the only thing that's powerful enough, creative enough, diverse enough, and able to bring all these tensions we're talking about and all these different variables together into a place where we can have a genuine way forward. Because when it's left up to us, we're just going to wind up finding some hill to die on and crucifying each other. And Christ already died on that hill for us, and so we can take it. I'm interested to Timothy.
You're reading this comment?
I am.
Yes. Who wants to jump in on this one first?
Yeah.
And we're not jumping, Timothy, we're not jumping in like jumping on you or anything. Thank you for this very insightful barb that you've put into our show today. Jason, how you want to handle this one? Because both of us, I think, endorsed Timothy Scott for president. And so I don't know if you knew that, Tim Edson, but we did not endorse Donald Trump. And we saw some flaws in the duality of the Democrat and Republican platforms. And so we went grassroots, reached out to Tim Scott and his team. At least I did. And I've now been getting correspondences every week from his office, wanting him to run for president and casting our votes for the independent, who would have been Tim Scott. Not running, but that's where we cast our vote in this last election. So we really believe in Tim Scott. Yeah. And I'm really encouraged by this question. So Jason, take it. See ya. How about?
If I were to work backwards, does his African-American background give him any more authority on this subject? I don't know if authority is exactly the right word, but he definitely gives him a voice. And if I were to stand up there and say African-American, there is no race, America's not racist, and they hear it from majority culture white person, I'm kicked off the reservation. I mean, black churches are shutting down. They're like, you got to be kidding me. When a prominent leader like Tim Scott, who is proven himself to be a worthy leader, stands up and says something like this, I think his voice definitely reaches into places that mine just won't. Period. I don't know if that's authority or not. I definitely know that is just the consequence of his ethnicity and his leadership platform. So plenty of white evangelicals have certainly echoed his sentiment. Yep, and they've gotten the response because, I mean, that we live in a I'm convinced that cultural Marxism is definitely a part of our culture. We got to know that. And when the hegemonic power or the big power speaks up and says, no, this isn't what you think it is, the right response is the pushback. So, having white evangelicals echo the sentiment would be par for the course, according to those guys. Now, is Americans are not racist? Well, here are my problems with this, and the statement itself is so general, right, that it causes a lot of problems. Because anytime you start working with generalities, right, that's like to say, like, if I were to say in a positive, like, black people are soul singers, all of them, right? Well, there's a
Good example.
Black people are athletic, yeah, right.
I'm singing Mary.
Yeah, I'm making a very general statement, and when you start messing with those generalities like that in such a large level, there's something wrong. You're going to have Swiss cheese all over the place, because that's just rhetorically. It's not a good argument. It's not a good statement, because the mere fact is there are Americans who are racist, and there are Americans who are not wanting to be or desiring to be different or not racist. This blanket statement is what got him in trouble. I think what he's trying to say is, I'm assuming what he's trying to say is America in itself is not systematically racist. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think that's what he was trying to convey, is that he's pushing back against critical race theory. He's pushing back against the idea of systematic racism. And I could be off wrong, but I just think
let's invite him on the show, Jason. That's what we do.
I would love to have a conversation with Tim Scott.
Tim Scott, or any representative from Tim Scott, or anybody out there who knows any representative from Tim Scott, get him on the show, man. Those ratings will go sky high, man. We would love to have him here. Fox News, just turn those guys down. You're coming to the Way Forward show. We voted for you for president. That would be just a bucket list experience for us to be able to meet Tim Scott and then let him clarify his statements. Something I have said on this show repeatedly. I know you don't like to hear this, white America. I know you don't like to hear this, white evangelicals, but your voice, because of the critical race theory, because of the identity politics, because of a lot of things that are out there, your voice does not mean as much right now. In fact, I don't think white voices are going to mean as much going forward, demographically speaking, looking at the fact that the majority culture is soon, in the next 20 to 15 years, going to become equal with, and then the minority culture in our society. Enfranchise minority voices to be able to speak to some of these issues so that we have a unified front. White people who have been saying it for years, and now black people who are saying it and saying some of those same things, is an important feature in society moving forward, as well as the church moving forward. For far too long, minority voices have been disenfranchised and not allowed to speak to these issues, and not allowed to be the authority to speak to these issues. Or, and I fear that this is not the case, but sometimes I think it is. And I want to get Candace Owens on the show because I want to challenge you on this point. Sometimes black voices are brought into the discussion so that they can echo and become an echo chamber for white America, to soothe the conscience of white America, who says, you know what, we feel really bad about this issue, But if we can get black people to say what it is that we've been saying, we're going to feel a lot better, because now everybody's saying it. Now black people, and we can do this black on black kind of crime thing that's going on here. And I'm not saying that that's what's going on here, because we believe in Tim Scott, right, Jason?
Yep.
Tim Scott. We believe in Tim Scott, and we believe he's a man of conviction. He's a man of faith. But I will simply say, you nailed it, Jason. The category was a little bit broad. Not all America is racist. Despite what critical race theory, not all white Americans are racist. Now, some are racist, obviously, but then there are some who are biased because of their ignorance. Like the discussion that you were having with some of your peers when you moved to Wisconsin and you were around people who all white culture. That was just pure ignorance that led to a bias, that led to perhaps racism unchecked. And so they went down that progression rather quickly, because there was nobody to stop that progression. There was nobody to speak up and say, what the heck are you talking about? No, that's not right. No, you can't say that. And I think that is very uncomfortable sometimes for white America to hear people push back a little bit in the minority culture, push back a little bit and say, wait just a second. I can go with you so far, but then we got to push back on this issue, because that comes across as being either tone deaf, extremely biased, extremely ignorant, or outright racist. And I've had good friends, and I'll stop right here. I've had really good friends who have thought that they could tell me racist jokes because nobody ever challenged them. Nobody ever questioned the fact of what they were saying, and they would say their racist joke, and then I didn't laugh. And then I would look at them and say, that's racist. And they went, oh, it is. And so some of that is what white America's response would be if we could actually have this discussion with a little bit fuller intensity. No, hear me say it. Not all white Americans are racist. No, not all white evangelicals are racist. Please get that on the comments. Do not edit this out of this broadcast. Hear me say that. But I want to be clear about that.
Yeah. And that's the thing about having the conversation, is that we just, he went awfully broad, and which seems a little uncharacteristic of him. He's usually pretty clear, and I don't know if he was just pushing back against Biden and those guys, because he came right after the presidential address, and Biden, that whole movement is going insane. As a matter of fact, I'm living in a state right now that is pushing critical race theory, progressive ideology so hard.
You're in Illinois.
We're going to be suffering educationally. We're losing police officers, teachers. We're losing all kinds of crazy stuff, and so it's definitely making life difficult. And he may be pushing back against some of that, but he was very general there. And what we know was really sad was just the response he got was just insane.
See, I haven't been able to keep up with all that, but according to Timothy Edson, that was his point, is the whole tokenism of the moment.
Well, here's the other problem is, like, let's say that Tim Scott, Candace Owens, and those guys, they have some valid points, and they're talking really good ways forward for race in America. The narrative, though, the moment you speak out against these things, or you say something like this, you are a token black person for the white people. That's a narrative that's spun. And I just think that's crazy, because there's a lot of Tim Scott's leadership that's not that way.
Right.
There's massive things he's doing for the black community, financially, economically, educationally.
Opportunity zones.
That he doesn't need to be called Uncle Tim. Now, he made a very
Uncle
blanket
Tom
statement.
either. Or Uncle Ted. Or Uncle Tommy.
So I just think, again, and then even Jimmy Kimmel, which was insane. The guy who got in trouble for doing blackface is now criticizing Tim Scott for saying what he's saying, and gets away with it. And like you can just have this platform now. I can sit there and make fun of anybody who doesn't agree with me. And there again, the narrative that's being put out there, anybody who speaks against this, black or white, Asian or whatever, is now going to be racist. And that's just crazy.
Yeah.
Or a token, right? And I just think that's insane.
So, oh man, I wish we had more time to do it. Like, I know, I think our band is at the door, and they're like, okay, Erskine, like we're supposed to be going somewhere. We have nowhere to go. So I got to get off here in just a second. But man, yeah, what a great show today. And I don't want to rush this statement, but I want to be clear about the fact that on this show, Way Forward especially, we have no home. Here we
Yeah.
have no lasting city, Jason, because we are not going to satisfy the requirements of a Christian nationalist, white, Republican, Trump is Jesus kind of culture that we live in today. And you can try to say that that's not what we've, to some extent, evolved into. But I would show you many historical examples that are very sad in our current day that relate to Christianity in America. I think critical race theory is a big problem. I think Christian nationalism is a big problem. I think they're both a problem. So we're definitely not going to be welcomed in with loving arms from that group, nor on the other side of it, as you just so aptly and adroitly stated, we're not going to hold the party line of critical race theory and liberal agendas and liberal philosophies and that which is killing our families, killing our schools, killing our culture, and literally killing babies. We would never endorse those kind of things. We are gospel minded. And so they're going to come at us from both sides. And we fully recognize that. We fully know that we're not going to be embraced by either side. The documentary, by the way, Uncle Tom, pretty good one. Larry Elder, Candace Owens. I had some issues with it, but go and watch it and see what you think. But just simply to say that our way forward is not to attach ourselves to any left-leaning side or any right-leaning side, but the way forward is the way of Christ, which I believe on the middle, he would say, Democrats, on your platform, a pox on that. Republicans, a pox on some of the things that you guys are doing as well. Here's the way forward. And that's what we're trying to do on the show. Man, a lot of good comments on the screen here.
I was reading Scott's, and I'm not quite sure. White evangelical Christians with conservative political views like to associate with like-minded black evangelical Christians with conservative political views. I'm not sure that is an indictment that they only want to associate with a certain kind of black person. White evangelical Christians with conservative political views probably are pretty unwelcoming to white people that live different. Yeah, I think we made that point though, didn't we? Are you reading this comment? I think we made the point that
good comment.
Yeah, early on that in our conversation we said that I think actually we'll speak more to it next time because we're talking about the white transition. Coach Aaron Dickerson was talking about the changing of his church community when it started to reach out to African American community and it became predominantly African American. The white community transitioned out, and we can get to that maybe next week. But one of the points he did make was that once that change took place, there was a white flight. And I think one of the comments we made earlier, and you can go back and check, but was, there will be white people with political views that won't be embraced either. I mean, it doesn't become about race at that point. I'm just trying to remember the context that we were talking about, but I think I get what he's saying. But I think we're speaking to the question of are white evangelicals glossing over racism? That was our question, because that was the question that was the statement that Martin Luther King made in his letter in Birmingham. Was in the 60s they were glossing it over, and we asked, is that still happening today?
And I think that one point that I am not missing in what Scott is saying, and hopefully we'll actually get him on the show to be able to make this comment. But I think that the issue is that everything is being funneled into a conversation about race. And I see that in a lot of what it is that he's saying there, is that we're funneling everything down to, well, this is black and this is white. And certainly that's one category. But we talked about race, politics, religion. We even talked about the Chicago Bears on this show. And so we're broadening the categories so that we have ways of processing information and ways of helpfully moving the dialogue along. So there are some socioeconomic factors that, people of a certain socioeconomic status, they sometimes tend to group together. People of ethnicity, they certainly sometimes will coalesce together. Educational backgrounds, and it can even go so far as to be various perspectives and things that we like. And would be a way of us coalescing. The Bears fans get together. And so there's a lot of different ways for us to slice up this conversation. And I do think it's too small to just simply say it's a race issue. It's only a race issue. Everything should be viewed through the lens of race. And that's the predominant key to understanding all of this. Nope. It's a gospel issue. But which means it's a heart issue, which goes back to the comments that were made before, which means if it's a heart and a life issue, we've got to actually care about one another enough to listen and figure out what the issue is. Like the analogy, and I'll close with this, that Pastor Aaron was giving. He has a student that's struggling in his class, but that student hasn't eaten today. So I could tell the student, go do what you're supposed to do, and be very heavy-handed about what the student is supposed to do, because I'm the administrator and I'm the one who has authority. You need to listen to me, Or I could figure out, I'm listening to this kid. He hasn't eaten in a day or so. Let me help him out so that we can get back onto the program that we are trying to advance. And so I thought that was a very helpful analogy. Jason, I'm going to give you the final comment there. The comment section will be turned on for just a few more moments. So Jason, you make your final statements here. Way forward. What do we do?
Well, I mean, Scott clarified. So, he says he'll sum it up that people group with people they relate to, agree completely. It's just easier, agree completely. It's that way on both sides. Absolutely agree. That's one of the problems we're having, though, is the gospel says it takes all these people who have absolutely nothing in common with each other, and the gospel brings them together. And that's what heaven's going to be like. We're going to have Christ in common, and we're going to have redemption in common. And so the goal of the church is to take all these groups with such diversity and different thinking and different way of living and different cultures and unite them in the gospel. And I think for racial reconciliation to happen, and for pastors like Aaron Dickerson and pastors like myself, when we see an issue that's happening, my African-American pastor needs to see me stand up with him and say, yeah, this is an issue that we need to address together. And that when we talk about glossing over, we're trying to say that we are not wanting to deny that this issue's not happening. We don't want to just overlook this issue, but actually walk hand in hand and say, look, if it bothers you, if it's something that's happening to you, it affects me too. And I'm intentionally going to engage that. And I think that's what both communities need to see from each other. I think that's going to be a way forward.
Amen. Amen to all of that. And Timothy Edson, thank you so much for your comments today. It seems like you're a new viewer to the show. And so please like or subscribe to the like or subscribe button on YouTube so that you get push notifications from the fact that we come on at all different times of the day. But I got Taylor, the real Tay-Tay, in the background here. Mm-hmm. He's playing bass this week for us. And so he has made the long journey. He actually helped drive some yesterday. Gave me an opportunity to rest because it was a long drive. But so I'm pressed up against it this week. It's been great to see all the comments that are out there. So many thoughtful and helpful comments that are there. And Scott, definitely appreciate that. The comment section will be turned on a few more moments. Man. We're going to play the outro here. Continue to pray for Pastor Jason. What are you preaching tomorrow?
Acts 20, Paul's address to the Ephesians, spirit-empowered elders.
Okay.
So leadership in the church.
Amen. So continue to pray for Pastor Jason as well. I had the opportunity to get up at about 5 o'clock this morning after a very short night of sleep and do another broadcast for a group of dear friends in India who reached out to me this week and said, hey, if there's any way that you can join us, we want you to play music and we want you to speak to us. We're having a time of unprecedented national crisis with mass graves and second wave of the coronavirus that is absolutely devastating. Mm-hmm. And so what am I going to tell them? No, I need more sleep. And so I got up this morning and was able to share with them for about half an hour and play some songs for them and then give them a message from Romans 8:28 and actually speak to some people who have lost loved ones in the last few days and few weeks, just to encourage them in their faith. And those brothers and sisters are strong over there. They're remaining steadfast in their faith, but do continue to pray for India. And I thank all you guys for your support for this show and other things that we're doing in the Erskine music world and for the way forward, because it is your support that allows us to be able to do the things that we're doing and reach people who are going through crisis, going through whatever they're going through, and helping us keep the hope of the gospel continuing to go forward. So thank you for that. This has been The Way Forward. We will see you guys, Lord willing, and if the creek don't rise, next week. Taylor, tell everybody goodbye.
Hey, thank y'all for joining us today. Goodbye.
This is going to be a fun weekend.
Yeah.